Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Harsh, have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
So, Harsh, as we can see that you are from Sonipat,
Yes, sir.
Gohana, Sonipat district
Yes.
in Haryana, but you were born in Jeend.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your optional is history.
Yes, sir.
And you have done your BA in history and political science from St. Stephen's College, Delhi.
Yes, sir.
You have also done MA in history from St. Stephen's College.
Yes, sir.
And you are fond of cricket, reading non-fiction books of English language, along with playing narrative uh, drivers,
Driven.
narrative-driven video games.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Exercising and playing musical instruments, learning different languages. Your options are IAS, IPS, IT, Customs, and Indian Foreign Service.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Harsh, in Haryana, we hear so many people, believing in the so-called Babas of Haryana. They have become so famous, Rampal and Ram Rahim and everyone. Now, Haryana is a very progressive state, and still people uh, go into these Babas for redressal of, their grievances or problems. Why this kind of a contradiction in terms? On one hand, you are very progressive state, and people are going to the Babas.
Sir, the very first reason for that would be the progressive nature of the state is at present in terms of monetary terms, sir. The state has become very prosperous on the back of the agricultural revolution in India. But culturally, sir, the state has remained relatively backward, and that has primarily contributed to this trend, sir. Secondly, sir, such sects or babas are popular all over the country. But the problem is that the babas of Haryana have been in news due to all the wrong reasons. That has also, it may be a perception too that it's more prominent in Haryana.
But in a very small state, your number of Babas are rather large.
Yes, sir, relatively large.
Relatively
But
large.
it's, I think, a all India phenomenon. But a more pronounced.
But why people go to Babas?
I think, sir, mainly for the redressal of their personal grievances, which they think are beyond their control. And these Babas or Godmen promise them a solution through magical means, which also attracts them.
If you were a civil servant, how can you use the influence which the Babas are having over people in implementation of the public policies of the government? Can you use them constructively and use them on your side? And because they wield a lot of influence, what are some of the areas where you think you can really bring about a change in the mindset of the people in respect of certain aspects which are so genuinely needed in the society?
I think, sir, they can be used in a constructive manner because most.
Example?
Yes, sir. For example, the now infamous Shri Ram Rahim, who was convicted for rape, his followers mostly came from the lower classes and castes. So, in principle, his dera believed in no caste, and in that sense, influence of such Babas can be used to propagate the message of non-caste discrimination, sir. And secondly, sir, the same Baba that whose name I have cited, his followers also even today are very prominently engaged in social activities such as charity and also cleanliness work, sir. Especially in the city I used to live in, they are very prominent in cleanliness work, sir. So I think government's policy of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan can also be contributed to in such manner, but while keeping a check on their all activities so they don't get out of hand.
Okay, good, very good. Now, tell me, take a situation in which you are holding on to a very high position in an educational institution, say like Vice Chancellor, and you are expecting a good grant from the ministry, and very shortly you are going to interview. You will be the chairperson of that interview board. You have to select professors for that university. the private secretary to the minister who is in charge of higher education, he gives you a ring and he says that I believe you are going to take an interview, and the minister's relation or very close to the minister, he is also one of the candidates. And the minister will be very pleased in case that person is selected. And then sheepishly he also admits that there is a file pending relating to the release of grant pertaining to your university, and we will be very happy to get that file quickly released so that the grant flows in. Now you are in an ethical dilemma, on which on one side you want the grant to come to your university, on the other hand the question of selecting the most meritorious person. What will you do?
Sir, in this case, my approach would be to go with the most meritorious person. The reason being, sir, because if this arrangement comes out, I think the whole thing can also go in jeopardy, because then the name of the institution will also get tarnished, and also the grant may stop if it comes to the public eye. And secondly, sir, selecting in such way is highly unethical, and it may hurt the institution in the long run, cutting the funding altogether in future.
One more thing, which is, will you not go to the minister and explain this to him, that your private secretary has rung you up, asking him whether he had actually communicated that thing or not? If he had not, it is only the minister's PA who is saying that is also a possibility. And secondly, even if he has, if you explain to him that this is going to put the educational institution into a bad reputation, so will you not like to do that also? At the same time, selecting the most meritorious.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, if you are the Prime Minister of this country, for example, hypothetically, what 5 steps you would like to take as your priority areas?
Sir, the very first area would be the economy.
Economy, all right.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Secondly, sir, social sectors, mainly poverty alleviation. Third would be, sir, defense. Fourth would be technology. And lastly, sir, I think internal security.
Will you not like to bring the political parties under the ambit of RTI?
Yes, sir, but that would be a very
difficult step.
Yes, sir.
Okay. My last question to you would be that can you give me an example of proactive, reactive, and inactive kinds of governance? Proactive, reactive, and inactive forms of government.
From Indian history,
Indian
sir.
perspective.
Okay, Indian perspective,
Yes.
sir. Proactive perspective of governance, sir, first would be the recent initiative driven by nudge policy of government, such as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao initiative. Such things, I think, are the examples of proactive initiatives. So reactive initiatives would be policies such as the Nasbandi Abhiyan of 1970s and 1980s, where population control was forced upon people. And sir, lastly, can you repeat?
Inactive.
Inactive, sir. I can't think of any inactive at the moment, sir.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Harsh,
Yes,
how do you pronounce it?
HERRSH.
So it is spelled very differently from what we normally spell it. Is it a Baba influence? Is it an astrologer's influence, numerologist's influence? What makes you spell it like this?
Actually, ma'am, my mother believes in numerology.
Okay.
So she suggested that I should have this spelling. And out of respect for her, I went with it, ma'am.
So this is from birth, or it's a recent thing?
It was changed in 2006, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So you attribute to your success in the civil services onto the change of these names?
Personally, no, sir. I don't believe in it. But my mother does, sir.
Okay. So, Haryana. Brides are being imported in Haryana. The skewed sex ratio. Has it improved in the recent year or two, or it still remains skewed? How skewed is it?
In the recent years, ma'am, it has improved significantly as per the latest data of Haryana government. In census 2011, it was at lowest at 830, and at present in 2020, also in 19's data, it has gone up to 920, with some districts even posting above 950, ma'am.
Okay. So what is the reason for this improvement?
The main reason has been, ma'am, after the census of 2011, the state government and also the central government gave very dedicated attention to this subject. And the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Abhiyan is I think the main reason why this change has came up. And also the stricter enforcement of laws such as the PNDT Act in the state has also brought this change, ma'am.
Okay. Are brides still being imported?
Yes, ma'am. In a few districts such as Nuh, it's a very prominent practice. They are called the Molki brides because the sex ratio has now improved, ma'am. But there are still men who will remain unmarried, at least for this generation, the present generation.
Basically from Bihar.
From, yes, ma'am, eastern states, the impoverished states.
So Haryana was known basically for the robust, healthy kind of breed.
Yes,
so how does that impact the breed now? They were not credited much for this, but now they are doing very well even in this sports and everything. But with the intermixing of Bihar and Haryana, how is that impacted?
I think, ma'am, first of all, this notion that Haryana's culture is this way is a colonial notion of martial races. Haryana
basically agricultural state it used
yes,
to be,
ma'am.
though now it is more of a manufacturing state.
Yes, ma'am. This mixing of cultures, I think, ma'am, hasn't impacted that image a lot because the state still performs very well in sports and still sends a lot of young men and women to the army. I think this intermixing is not hurting that image of the state.
It's not?
In my opinion, no, ma'am.
Okay. What is the status of women by and large in Haryana? How balanced is it towards women?
I think, ma'am, the society largely remains patriarchal in Haryana, like much of India. But I think...
not much of India. It's fast changing in many other states.
Yes, ma'am, I was just coming to that. In Haryana too, in line with that, it's improving a lot. Women are now encouraged to study and also get employed.
What about their property rights?
Property rights are, ma'am, now getting enforced after the 2005 amendment to the Hindu Marriage Act.
What is the amendment?
As per it, ma'am, the corpora sine right of women was recognized by the Supreme Court that they can too...
By the Supreme Court?
Sorry, ma'am. Supreme Court recognized it recently. That law came in effect from a retrospective perspective.
How is the law brought in?
The law was brought in 2005, ma'am.
How is the law brought in?
How is the law?
Through because Parliament. You are saying Supreme Court.
No,
I don't think it was the Supreme Court.
Yes, ma'am. It wasn't the Supreme Court. Supreme Court actually now has held that the law came in...
I'm not talking of Supreme Court. I'm talking of from the stage of a bill. How does it become an act?
The procedure for...
Yes, ma'am. The first MPs or MLAs in their respective parliament and state legislatures.
MLAs in parliament?
No, ma'am. I said respectively in MLAs and MPs.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I will just focus on the parliamentary laws now. So MPs, first of all, introduce bills into the parliament, which are proposals for legislation. These bills...
The MPs introduce. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. They can be private members' bills and they also can be government bills, which are introduced by those MPs whose party is in power. And then the bills are, ma'am, submitted for the first reading. The first reading basically constitute the recitation of the bill. Then the bills go into the second reading stage. In this stage, ma'am, they are submitted to the select committees of the parliament.
Not all bills?
But there's the convention. It's not mandatory. But most of the times, these bills go to the select committees of the parliament, which prepare reports on these bills. And now these bills are then presented to the parliament. And in the third reading stage, voting takes place on these. If these bills are voted upon by the majority of the strength of the house.
Which house?
Whichever house they have been introduced in. So if, say, Lok Sabha, if they have been introduced in Lok Sabha, after getting the approval of Lok Sabha, they are then sent to the Rajya Sabha, where the similar procedure is followed. If the Rajya Sabha too agrees with majority of its strength on the bill is sent to the President of India.
Can bills be introduced in both houses?
Ordinary bills can be. Same goes for constitutional amendment bills, but money bills cannot be introduced.
Yes, only the monetary bills are to be introduced in the Lok Sabha.
Only, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. And then it becomes an act.
After
So
President
this
consents,
amendment to the Hindu Succession Act was brought in by
brought in by, ma'am, I'm not aware of that.
an
Parliament
act of
India.
Parliament,
No, no,
not by Supreme Court.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is the role of panchayats and KHAPs in supporting the status of women in Haryana only?
I'm not aware of that.
You have no idea how the KHAPs and the panchayats function.
I know about their functioning, but not vis-a-vis women, how directly they impact them.
The love jihad.
Love jihad is not a very prominent concept in Haryana as of yet, ma'am. It's more about inter-caste marriages in Haryana, but not the exact functioning, ma'am. I'm not aware of them.
Okay. This is your third attempt.
Yes, ma'am.
And your subjects are perfect for the civil services, the subjects which you have chosen.
Yes, ma'am. They are
Yes?
congruent.
So, what has kind of been the main block in the last 2 years?
Ma'am, in my first attempt, I didn't focus much on the CSET, and because my mathematical background at that point of time was not that strong,
Okay.
and I couldn't make it through CSET exam. In my second attempt, ma'am, I cleared the prelims, but in mains I scored 743, while the cutoff was 745.
Okay. And your second preference is police service.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What attracts you to the police service? Because there is so much of corruption. People are not comfortable dealing with the police at all.
For me,
I would hesitate to go to a thana post sundown.
personally, ma'am, I think first of all it would be, as you mentioned the point, first of all it would be to sort of reform that image of police. I think police is a very good institution of India, but I think the image needs a
So it's just
betterment.
image building, which you think will be.
No, for me personally, ma'am, I think it presents a very lucrative career opportunity, and it's on
Lucrative?
Yes, ma'am. For my skill set, I think it's a very good opportunity. Being a humanities graduate, civil services as a whole presents a very good career opportunity to me. And
All right. I think my time is not permitting. That's a very good debate we would have indulged in. Thank you so much.
So let me ask some specific questions from a history student. You must have studied European history as well, did you?
Yes,
Not
sir.
the syllabus of civil service, but otherwise MA.
Yes, sir, I have.
You have? Have you heard of Cardinal Richelieu?
No, sir, no.
Are you aware of an author called David Thompson?
No, sir, sorry, I am not.
It was hope which created the French Revolution, and it was despair which led it into the hands of Napoleon.
Yes, sir.
What is your comment on this?
Sir, I agree with the statement. The first part, that hope created French Revolution, is due to
And what did the hope constitute of?
Sir, it was
Ideals. What ideals were those?
liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Okay.
These were the main ideals of French Revolution, sir.
Okay.
And the hope was to do away with the ancien regime, which was based on the principle of divine rights of various estates. I think so, sir. Basically, the hope was that it would be done away with. But how the revolution unfolded between 1789 to 1799, with no structure, a strong structure in place, I think that led to despair, the reign of terror, and then the incapable government.
Who were the main actors as far as reign of terror is concerned?
Sir, it was Robespierre.
Robespierre. Okay.
It was followed by the Directory government, and it was the failures of Directory government to sort of protect the ideals of French Revolution that led Napoleon to spring up in power, because he was the only successful person of that time. He was winning battles for France while the government was struggling.
Do you remember the most colorful expression of description of Napoleon?
Second, I'm not aware. I'm not able to.
World
comprehend the
history on
question.
horseback.
Yes, sir. His photo.
Again, David Thompson only.
Okay, sir.
Okay. All right. History repeats itself first as a tragedy and then as a farce. Said
By Karl Marx.
Karl Marx. Now, what does it imply?
Sir, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. So please brush up on that.
Yes, sir. I will.
So the first time their circumstances are genuine circumstances for the historical events, but not the second time. They just imitate the earlier circumstances and then, okay. So read up on this issue. Middle Ages are called the Dark Ages, as far as Europe is concerned, and then Enlightenment, Renaissance and all. Why Middle Ages were called Dark Ages?
Sir, Middle Ages, first of all, marked the rise of feudalism in Europe, the feudal institutions. And secondly, sir, it was also a period when the climate was relatively cold in Europe, and due to which agricultural prosperity was at a low. And Renaissance marks the change in, first of all, society and culture of Europe, and secondly, also the
So
environment.
which is that particular year in 15th century? When Renaissance is attributed to that particular year, the date.
So Renaissance, I think, starts from 12th century.
Okay.
In 15th century, the Reformation took place.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm not aware of the exact year, sir.
So can you tell some important events of 1453?
1453, sir. First of all, I am not able to
Constantinople.
pronounce. Sir, the
Constantinople.
city, the capital
Fall.
of yes, sir. It fell to the Ottomans, and sir, I'm only able to think of that
Okay.
at the moment.
All right. Thank you.
Harsh, you are a student of history.
Yes, sir.
Which school of thought do you subscribe to? Left wing or right wing?
Sir, not any one
You
of them. I
don't,
read
you don't belong to any school, huh?
not any school, sir.
Do you consider Lord Rama as a mythological figure or as a historical figure?
Sir, as a student of history, I think Lord Rama, due to the lack of archaeological evidence on him, would be considered a mythological figure. But as archaeology in this region, the Ganga Basin region, is not as developed as it could be, I think that leaves it debatable as to whether he was a mythological or historical person. But as far as the evidence at present is concerned, he would be considered a mythological person.
By calling him an mythological figure, don't you think you are adding fuel to the fire? There's
Sir,
already some controversy in our
Yes, sir,
country.
as I said, sir, only from a historical, as a student of history,
No
that would-
archaeological evidence.
because of the archaeological evidence. But in the domain of culture, in the domain of religion, I definitely think he was a historical person from that perspective. Yes, sir.
Okay, talking about archaeology, you belong to Haryana.
Yes, sir.
There is a place in Hisar called Rakhigadi.
Yes, sir.
Have you heard about it?
Yes, sir.
Some excavation is going on by the Archaeological Survey of India. What is your take on that? What are the findings of this
Yes, sir.
excavation? Does it throw any light on the migration theory of the Aryans?
Yes, sir. So the findings from Rakhegadi was regarding the DNA analysis of the findings of the artifacts of that site, sir. And it has revealed that the populace of the place during the Harappan civilization time was of a mixed origin, and it doesn't present any evidence that they were Iranian or the region we considered we attribute to the Aryans. So it in a way refutes that theory and said that from the very beginning the Indus Valley civilization was a heterogeneous one as far as the DNA composition is concerned.
Okay. You participated in parliamentary competition
Yes, sir.
during your school days.
School
huh?
days, yes.
Do you watch the parliamentary proceedings live on the TV?
No, sir, I don't.
You have never?
Sir, I have, but not very regularly.
Not regularly.
Yes,
huh?
sir.
What do you observe there? Opposition staging a walkout.
Yes, sir, such instances have risen in the past few years, sir, where the business of house has been disrupted due to such disruptions. Even a session was called off due to such instances. But I think overall, sir, Parliament also functions very efficiently in cases. But such instances have been unfortunate in the past few years.
Okay. The Speaker of Lok Sabha and Chairman of Rajya Sabha are constitutional figures. They're constitutional functionaries, are they?
Sir, I'm not able to
No
recall.
idea. Can they take sides of the government or the party in power?
Sir, in practice they can, but not as per the rules. The rules in case of voting inequality of in the case of equality of votes, only they can vote in that circumstance, sir. Otherwise they cannot. And but informally or in practice they can do so by diverting the business of house or stopping the MPs or MPs of other party during their speeches, but
Okay.
not as per provisions, sir.
Talking about ethical dilemma, we have been discussing
Yes, sir.
just now. Supposing you are appointed as the district magistrate of Hisar or any other state, in your office there is a case of sexual harassment of a lady clerk or lady officer under you by a male colleague. What course of action would you follow?
Sir, first of all, I would record the statement of the lady in question
Record the statement of the lady.
who has complained regarding this,
Okay.
and then register her complaint on this.
With the police.
Yes, sir, with the police. And I think then police can follow their course of action. If I am in charge of that office, I will also ask the person who has been accused to take a leave or suspend him as far, till the inquiry goes
Are
on.
you aware of some guidelines issued by the Department of Personnel at the behest of the Supreme Court? Vishaka guidelines. they are
Vishaka
known as.
guidelines.
Have you read about it?
Sir, yes, sir. I cannot. I
It lays
can.
down some procedure to handle such cases.
I'm not able to recall
Campaign
the
committee and all
yes, sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
Please,
The committees have been constituted.
Okay. Another situation I'll give you. You are a district magistrate. You must be tendering with you must be handling so many tender cases. It's very routine thing. Sometimes minister calls you and asks you to accept a tender which is not the lowest. What will you do? How will you justify? Will you implement the minister's orders?
Sir, I will first try to reason with him that this can bring the
Okay, he insists. He doesn't agree with you. He's your minister.
Yes, sir.
He's supposed to implement the policy of the government.
Sir, I will ask him to give this order in writing.
Okay.
And if he still doesn't, if he says
Supposing
that,
he gives you orders in writing, what will you do?
sir, then I will go
You do
forward
it.
it. Yes, sir.
You will not question any further?
No, sir, because that goes out of my jurisdiction.
You will not take your seniors into confidence, your commissioners, your secretaries, and others?
Sir, only if he refuses to give the order in writing. If he does so, then no. If he refuses,
One
then
last
yes.
question. The general perception is that the RTI Act, you are aware of this act?
Yes, sir.
RTI Act has collapsed. It is a failure because so many agents, so many organizations, political parties, judiciary, they are outside the purview of the RTI Act. Do you agree with this perception?
Sir, in these domains, as you just
Pardon?
cited, in these domains, as you cited, sir, it has had limits its success, but overall, I think it has been a success in overall picture, sir.
What kind of success? An institution called CIC, Central Information Commission. Is it a statutory body or a constitutional body?
It's a statutory body.
Statutory body.
Yes, sir.
Some powers of the commission has been curbed by the government. Their service conditions are laid down by the government. Is it not? Is it an appropriate act?
Sir, the changes that were brought to their service conditions were due to them being a statutory body, sir. And because before that, they were same as the constitutional bodies such as the Election Commission. So I think that's a right step to bring them in that line. But I don't think that it directly curbs their independence.
So government can change the service conditions of any commissioner, chief commissioner. They can make anybody as commissioner and anybody as his deputy.
Sir, the government has not changed the appointment procedure. The selection committee still selects the members to be appointed. So if that gets changes, then maybe this might be the case.
Okay. Sir, आप
You're from Haryana, right?
Yes, sir.
And IPS is your second option, as we can see.
Yes, sir.
How many DGPs are there in Haryana?
Sir, I'm not aware of that.
Right. When the Baba Ram Rahim case happened and he was to be arrested, eventually they called out the army to arrest him. One company under one Major Saab was brought in, and under their action, this guy was apprehended. What is it that anything of serious kind that has to be done, the administration actually not goes on the police but goes back on the army? So you got, I think, if I'm not wrong, there are 80 DGPs in Haryana or something like that. This figure may not be accurate, but large number. And eventually it is one Major Saab from the army with 100 men. What is in the culture of police and culture of the army that army can do it and police can't do it? And as I see, the police is armed and equipped entirely for these kind of jobs. Army is not.
So the reason behind that is, first of all, unfortunately, the policing system in the country as a whole has been politicized in the past few decades. I think the first reason is that, and in this particular case, the Ram Rahim arrest case, sir, I think that was the prime motivation, because the political parties at the time didn't want it to look bad in the eyes of the millions of followers of Ram Rahim. So army, which fortunately remains depoliticized as of now, is called in such situations. So the political interests or the image of the party or the administration in question doesn't get called into the place, which surely is wrong, but that's the prime reason in my opinion, sir.
Okay, Wing Commander Abhinandan, have you heard this name? Wing Commander Abhinandan.
Yes, sir, I have.
He was the one who shot a Pakistani F-16, and he was also shot and captured there. Some political party actually used his photograph in certain posters along with politicians. Would you look at it as the politicization of the Indian Army or Indian military?
So this instance alone may give a picture that this is the case, but the army as an institution is not politicized as of now, sir. But such instances which are really unfortunate, but such instances may give a picture, but the army as a whole remains depoliticized.
All right. You think Chanakya's principles of statecraft are applicable today in the present day context?
Sir, I'm not able to recall
Okay,
that.
read it. It's very interesting.
Yes, sir.
And I think they are in the present context. If you apply, it's what it is. Unfortunately, we read more of Machiavelli and we read more of Sun Tzu, but we don't read enough of Chanakya. You see, Alexander invaded India, then Mughals invaded 12th century onwards, Islamic Muslim rulers, and then the Britishers here. All these invaders in India their forces were much smaller in size than the armies of the Indian kings. But we were defeated 9 times out of 10. What were the reasons that Indian kings continued to lose despite much bigger armies?
Sir, in all these cases, right from the Alexander's invasion, sir, the prime reason was that Indian kingdoms and princes remained disunited. They were not helping each other, or nor was there a central polity in India. And whenever there were central polities and great empires in India, such invasions were thwarted. But in these particular cases, sir, there was a void in North India particularly when these invasions happened. During Alexander's invasion, he could only conquer till those areas where the polities were small. He couldn't cross to the Nanda Empire, which was really strong, sir. And even in the case of Mughals, same thing was happening. There was no central polity in North India. Rajput polities were fighting among themselves. And the similar was situation even during the 10th, 11th century invasions of the Arabs. So I think disunity was the main cause.
Right,
sir.
correct. Now you are an IPS aspirant as your second choice. Recently the government had instituted a policy of recruitment for the army by a name called Agniveer. Have you heard of this?
Yes, sir.
What are the problems with that policy?
Sir, the very first problem is the short span of training that the scheme envisages. Because as experience has shown, even more recently in the Russia-Ukraine war, that the soldiers who have been trained for such a less period are, first of all, not very useful in the combat scenarios. And secondly, they are also more inclined to make mistakes. So first of all, India also under threat from both borders. I think that's not a very good step to train personnel less. So I think that's the first problem, sir.
Okay, the fact that after all the protests, a lot of tweaking of this policy was done by the government, there are certain policy formulation lessons from this whole exercise for a civil servant. What are those?
Sir, I'm not aware of the changes as such that have been made, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so Harsh, you will go back to the waiting room for a few minutes. We'll call you back again for
Thank you, sir.
feedback. So Harsh, first of all, we will ask you this question as to how do you think you fared at this mock interview?
Sir, I think it was decent, but it requires some work.
Okay.
In some.
Is it the first mock interview?
It's my second, sir.
Second.
Yes.
This year, second interview.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you went to the interview stage earlier also?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Only up to the mains level.
Yes,
I mean, interview you're not called. First time you have been
First
called.
interview.
All right. So, Harsh, there are certain things I can say that you are very good. There is no doubt about it. You were able to come out with plausible, good answers in respect of most of the questions. So they were impressive. And wherever you were in doubt, you admitted that you were not knowing that, which again is a good thing. Your clarity of expression, your communication skills, analysis of the questions, everything was fine. Now, the only thing that needs to be done is that, when is your interview, by the way?
So the dates have not.
Acha, your date has not come. It will be after March, that means.
Yes, sir. Most probably.
Okay. So the only thing for which you have sufficient time is that bring more force and enthusiasm in what you say. So that is going to create much more, lasting impression and a better impression also. The content is good, but the way you have to present the content can be slightly more forceful. And a smiling face, an occasional smile would always do you good. And otherwise, the tie has to be in such a way that,
Yes.
so that, that's about it. But otherwise, your attire is fine, your shoes are fine. And coming to now specifics now. Since you belong to Haryana, many questions will be asked on the Haryana social problem. And Khap Panchayat is a very famous thing about Haryana. So the marriages of same Gotra, boys and girls, that problem. And that is why I started off the question about the Babas of Haryana, because Baba wield an influence, so do the Khap Panchayat also. So this is where Haryana has not been able to progress that much, even though agriculturally it has progressed very much. And the infrastructure is also very good. So typical problems of Haryana, when we will talk about, then one more policy will come automatically is reservation of jobs for the locals in Haryana. That also has come under criticism. And there are favors in favor and against also. You are very aware about that.
Yes, sir.
So that also question is likely to come. Why is Haryana an ideal destination for industry? So the question which may be coming is, if you have to sell Haryana to a foreign investor, what exactly are you going to talk about? Supposing you are in charge of the industries department and you want more and more industries should come like Maruti or Honda and others. So then what are the things that are typically strengths of Haryana? So that you should know. So it can be excellent road network, underground water is fine, labor unrest is not there, airport is very nearby, power situation is very good, and agriculturally very rich state. Industries are already doing very well there. The incentives in the industrial policy are very much there. So there will be many things. But when you talk about it, then when you have to project Haryana, then you also have to talk about other aspects, the tourism potential in Haryana, the status of women in Haryana, and similarly the eating habits, the dresses, the cultural side. That will make a whole picture. So know about Haryana everything about Haryana. You were born in Jind. So why Jind is important? That you have to know. It is because of tanneries. It is the central part of Haryana, and there was a talk of getting the capital also sometime in Jind. You remember that thing? So importance of Jind, importance of Sonipat in Mahabharat. What exactly significance Sonipat has? I'm sure you will be aware about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the 5 gaon, the 5 villages. So one of them was this. So then, of course, coming to your optional history, your BA is also history, and your MA is history, and optional is also history. So history, many questions were asked, you were able to field them quite well. And then political science. And since you come from a very prestigious institution in Delhi, so naturally the expectation would be more also. Okay. So know about everything about political science. You read constitution very well, and the directive principles and the fundamental rights and fundamental duties, the president, the role of parliament, when the president addresses the parliament, how the president is elected, role of Article 311 giving protection to the civil servants, all India services, So everything about constitution. The best thing would be read from page 1 to the last page. Then know about the economics, the economy of country, and go to the website of Finance Ministry, Economic Affairs, and also Reserve Bank of India and heavy industry. So these are some of the areas where you should learn more and more. Okay, they will tell you the latest things which are happening. Atmanirbhar Bharat again is a very important concept which was brought by the present government. And read the policies which came after 1947. And one of the very good books is called 70 Policies That Shaped India. You can look at Google. It gives you a bird eye view of how policies have been framed, and it gives description of each policy. So then specifically policies relating to the women, to children, and the senior citizens. Read them. What are the acts? POXO Act is there, and Domestic Violence Act is there, and Dowry Prohibition Act is there. All these acts. Then since IPS is your second preference, therefore what exactly are some of the things which you will introduce as an innovative measure to protect the lives of the senior citizen? For example, you will say that I will get the antecedents of the domestic servants carried out, better lighting, and app, and all those things for the protection of women. So the public policy. Then cricket, reading non-fiction books. One book you must read very thoroughly, so that if they ask you which is that book which you have read recently, tell them that this is that book. What is the aim of that book and the message it conveys. And then you talked about narrative driven video games. They may ask you about this particular narrative driven also. And exercising, whether you hit the gym or you do some sports activities. And if you do sports, then you must know everything about that sports also. So because you have written many hobbies, so they are subject to likelihood the questions being asked on that also. And learning different languages. So which language which you have learned? Which language have you learned, by the way?
Sir, I know Hindi, English, a little bit of Telugu, Spanish, and very rudimentary level of Portuguese.
Okay. All right. So the question may be on that also. And then coming to some other areas. One is the election process in this country. How is it brought about? The steps through which election takes place. That you must study. Read Representation of People Act. Why politics is criminalized in this country. Why it is not so in other developed countries. What are the reasons here? And different aspects connected with election. For example, simultaneous election of this and so on. So read about that. Read the role of the collector, the district administration. There are 5 or 6 roles of the collector which you should know. One is election, the other is revenue, third is law and order, fourth is the coordination for development programs and so on. Then of course the international institutions, role of the United Nations bodies in institution. Then foreign policy, about India's foreign policy with its neighbors. So these are general things which I have said, but otherwise your answers are quite good, and I would say that you stand a very good chance in getting good marks in the interview, but don't lose sight of some of the very, very crucial issues which are facing the country, and one is economy, of course, the other is corruption, and so they may ask you some innovative measures to suggest to bring down the corruption, how to take care of the different ingredients of good governance, because that is your job, good governance. So what is responsiveness, what is consensus building, what is inclusivity, these things, and also what are the foundational values which are required to be present in the civil servant. They may ask you what leadership, how it is important, and team building, how it is important, integrity, honesty, all these things. So that's about it. And general knowledge, you must prepare that very well. Last about 2 years general knowledge and the current affairs also. Read the newspaper on that particular day, and when you go there, then always have a good knowledge about what happened, what came in the news the previous day. And whenever the question is asked, I'll always understand the context of the question. Don't be in a hurry to give answers. Pause for a few seconds, think about it, and then give the answers. And always give the most important part of the answer, number 1. Then come out with the second, and be prepared for the supplementary questions. While facing the board, you must be having eye contact with the person who has asked the question, but also scan the entire board, left to right and right to left. And if you have not understood a question, you can always request the panel to repeat that question. Have slightly loud answers. It should be loud enough to reach the board. And if you feel at any point of time thirsty, take a glass of water. Okay? And write down your thoughts in piece of paper which is in front of you. That's about it. You will do extremely well. If you have any questions to ask, you can ask us.
Yes, sir. Sir, on this point, as you told me that the person who's asking the question, so when I'm answering the question, should I look in
Just
between?
a fleeting glance,
You
Okay,
see,
sir.
What you meant was
your
fleeting
eye
glance.
contact should be with that person.
Yes, sir.
But while having the eye contact, you can occasionally scan the entire board from
sir.
left to right, right to left, again come back to the same person with whom
The
you are
idea is
having
to
the eye
involve
contact.
them also. They should not feel left out. No, that is the important thing. Yeah.
So not continuously, just
No,
in
just
between
once in a
a
way.
small glance.
Ah,
kind
once
of.
in a way,
Scan
you
means
just-
that you scan from left to right, right to left, occasionally.
Okay, sir.
What else would you like to ask?
Sir, just that, sir. So, as I told you, sir, this is my second mock interview. So, sir, how much you have told me all the subjects, important ones, but how much work, sir, needs to be done, sir? I'm a bit lost on that front because
no.
my interview is almost 4 months.
Have confidence,
Yes, sir.
and have positivity with you.
Okay, sir.
Optimist. And as I said, whatever time is left before interview, here you have reached a certain stage by God's grace and your hard work. Don't lose this opportunity. Try to read as much as possible. Try to talk to people who know more than you, and prepare so well that tomorrow you do not lament over the fact that if I had studied more, I would have probably gone through. So do your job very well. Karma kariye, that is important. How much you have to do, that depends on your, the time available to you and capability. But reaching this stage, now there is no returning back, and you must make it this time, and you will make it. If you have this kind of present, you have presented yourself before this board. I think it was quite good, but for the small things which just will improve your thing considerably. But you are very good. Okay?
So can I just add one thing?
Sure.
If you're not sure of something, don't say it. Supreme Court. Twice you said. If you don't know it, you don't know it. Doesn't matter. But don't give a wrong answer. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So that is why I said Constitution you should read very well.
Yes, sir.
Constitution is one area which is definitely going to be in some question or the other. They may even ask you prohibition, which part of the Constitution talks about prohibition, or any other things like adding article like All India Services, which article talks about All India Services. As ma'am has very rightly said, if you don't know a particular thing, it is better to say that, can I take some time? Or if you don't know, then you can say that I do not know.
Okay,
There is nothing wrong in expressing ignorance once in a while. Okay. All the best. You will do very well.
All the best.
Thank you.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.